is not going well at all. I'm having a terrible time with the audit. Every single thing the auditor looks at, they have nonconformity. How can I get out of this audit? We need to step back, prepare again, start over, and schedule a new date for this audit because there's no way that we're going to get certified. If that's what you're thinking about right now, this would be an excellent video for you to be watching. This video is all about what do you do when you're saying this audit is going horrible, it's a train wreck, and I want to terminate this audit. How do I do that? And what are the consequences? Can I just terminate it and there'll be no consequences? It doesn't really work that way. But you can terminate an audit, and as long as you know why you're terminating it and know what the consequences are, it might be the right thing for you to do, but it might not be. So let me give you a little bit of context how I learned about termination of audits. I used to work for BSI. I was a notified body auditor. And during the opening meeting for every company that I would do a certification audit for, and this would be ISO 1345 certification and CE marking certification, we would go and do these quality system audits for the companies. And during the opening meeting, we would explain, if you want to, you can terminate this audit. If it's not going well and you're not going to get certified, you can terminate the audit and we can reschedule it for another time. That is your option. So they don't have to go through it. They can cancel if things are going very badly. That doesn't mean they're going to get certified at this time. That means they won't because they're terminating it. But it's their right to do that. Now, if you are doing a surveillance audit, so you've already got ISO certification and you tried to do that, it is possible to terminate the audit. But if the audit is not rescheduled before the deadline for doing a surveillance audit, then it puts your certificate that you already have in jeopardy, and you could lose that certificate, or temporarily it could be suspended. Companies are required, the notified body companies and the certification body companies are required to come back within 1 year to come back and do a certification audit. And some of them have slightly different policies because the amount of time required across process paperwork. So maybe it's 11 months for one company, or maybe they just stick to that 1 year deadline. But essentially, within 1 year of getting your certificate, you're supposed to be audited in a surveillance audit where they come back and check part of the quality system. The original surveillance audit or certification audit is going to be a stage 1 and a stage 2 audit, and they're going to look at the whole quality system. The surveillance audit, they can skip processes, and then the next surveillance audit, they'll cover the processes they missed. But the original certification audit, the timing of that stage 2 audit, you need to have your surveillance audit within 12 months of that. So if your certificate takes a month to get to you, it's not a year from the date of your certificate, it's a year from the date of your stage 2 audit. And that's why some notified bodies and certification bodies say 11 months, because it's approximately a month from the time you have your stage 2 to the time that you actually are getting a certificate in your hand. So if you were in that stage 2 audit and it was just nonconformity after nonconformity and you're clearly not going to get the certificate, you could just say, let's terminate the audit and let's reschedule this when the company's ready. We're obviously not ready. So that's your option, and it can keep from wasting some of your time. In general, I don't recommend doing that because now if you get your audit report, you have a full list of the things that are wrong, and they can come back and do a second audit to close down those issues that you weren't able to successfully complete for the stage 2. And now they could recommend you for certification in the next audit. But if you terminate, you have to start all the way back at the stage 1 audit again. And that could be a longer and more expensive process for you. So in general, even though it may make you feel better because the pain stops, it's not necessarily the best thing for you to terminate a certification audit in the middle of it, even if it's going badly, because at least you'll get a list of here's all the things that are wrong, and I can fix them before before they come back and do the second follow-up audit to try to close this down and recommend me for certification. Now, if you are doing a stage 1 certification audit and that's going horribly, you're not even going to get recommended for the stage 2 audit, and they're going to give you a list of things to fix. I would still recommend the same thing. Go ahead and finish the stage 1 audit so you have a more of a comprehensive list. But another thing that you should know is you can tell the auditor, look, it's obvious I'm not going to get certified. We're not ready for stage 2. So if you could you please focus on these areas that we want you to look at instead of these other areas that we know are just a wreck. And so that way, when they find something wrong, just, okay, I'll make a note. We got to worry about that. But let's go on to other areas instead of spending too much time on an area you know is broken and you're going to need to address. So that can be helpful to sort of redirect the auditor and acknowledge this isn't going to come out well, but rather than waste a bunch of time on bad things, tell me what we don't know rather than tell me more of the bad things. If your company is doing a surveillance audit or you're doing a recertification audit and you try to terminate at that time and you're not able to reschedule it before the time limit, you will lose your certificate. So that's something really important to understand about the consequences of terminating those audits. But that is an option you have. If you have that happen and it's an MDSAP audit, you will have to have, they're going to notify Health Canada within 15 days. You have to notify Health Canada within 30 days, and you will no longer be able to sell your product in Canada. And that will cause you to lose your Canadian license. If you do that, and it's an MDSAP audit, and you're doing business in the US FDA will be notified that your certificate's no longer valid. And so that may trigger them to come do an inspection of you. Like, why are they no longer ISO certified? Why did that certificate get terminated? So those are important things. If you had CE marking and you lose your quality system certificate, same thing. That will jeopardize your CE certificates for your products as well, not just your quality system certificate. So there's very big consequences when it's a certification body audit. Now, if we're talking about a supplier audit, you're a supplier and your customer is coming to audit you, or they send a consultant to audit you, and you need to terminate the audit. Generally, you're not paying them to come and audit you. They're doing that because they're your customer. So what are the consequences of terminating that kind of audit? Well, they're going to ask you why, and you're going to have a good reason. But assuming the reason's a good reason, would they be willing to reschedule it? They probably would be willing to reschedule it. It may be very inconvenient for them. They might be irritated, and you should plan for that and prepare and do your best to try to smooth over the situation. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to do business with that customer right away. They may take that into account and work through it with you. But what do you do if that's something they needed in order to continue to do business with you for legal reasons? If they needed it as part of a PMA product that they're trying to launch, or you're their CE marking contract manufacturer, that might affect their certifications. So there could be legal consequences for them, and there could be a disruption in their ability to sell their product, and that could be a major problem. So you don't just want to terminate audits just because it's inconvenient for you. You really have to have a good reason. Now, if let's say you have a family member is rushed to the hospital and you get notified, you get a call on your cell phone, hey, 911, I need you to come to the hospital right away. Little Susie broke her leg. That's a real good reason to go to the hospital, and you leave. But is there nobody in your organization that could fill in for you during the audit if you're not available? Do you have to terminate it just because you're not available? Probably not. If you're a very small company and you only have one person that knows the quality system, then you're probably going to have to. But If you're a larger company that has more resources, has multiple people that work on the quality system, you're probably not the only person. And so it would be appropriate for you to take care of your family emergency, you leave, but have somebody else cover for you while you're gone. And that would be a case where I wouldn't cancel the audit. I would just say, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave. But rather than terminating this supplier audit, I know you need to finish it. I'll have this person available. If you don't think that's going to work and you want to try to do this remotely or reschedule, I'm more than happy to, but I'll leave that decision up to you rather than me just terminating. Now, if you are not yet a supplier of that company and they're doing an initial supplier audit and you try to terminate, that's probably going to reflect poorly on your company and you're probably not going to be selected as a supplier. So that's a real consequence for your company. But usually there's no charges. So I haven't seen anybody charging their supplier because they had to cancel it. But it is costing them money. They had to travel there. They had to take the time. They scheduled it. There might have been a plane flight involved. And if you cancel that, unless you have something spelled out in writing in a contract that says they can charge you, they're going to be irritated, but they're not going to have a lot of repercussions other than to say, we won't buy from you anymore. So that's something to keep in mind. And if you have a supply contract, you might want to say under what conditions things can be terminated and what the consequences will be. Something to think about. I don't often see that in there. I see you will allow us to audit you and we will schedule it when it's mutually convenient for our two companies, but it doesn't talk about termination even for good reason. So that's something to think about. A third scenario would be an internal audit. So presumably when you're doing an internal audit, it's an auditor from the company auditing it's the company they work for. So it's just inconvenient. You have to reschedule it. You might need to finish that audit before you have your next certification audit or next FDA inspection. You're required to do one full quality system audit each year. And if you haven't done that yet and you're up against the deadline and then you have to terminate the internal audit because for whatever reason, then that could cause a 483 that you might have to write a CAPA for. But that might be better than continuing with an audit in certain situations. It depends on why you need to terminate it. However, if you're bringing in a consultant to do the audit for you and you try to terminate it, the chances are the consultant's going to charge you for the time because they took time out of their schedule and they might have travel. And I wasn't planning it, but I actually had a client yesterday that contacted me and said, I'm sorry, we have you scheduled for an audit. It was actually a mock FDA inspection. You were going to be out here next month. We just got a call from the FDA. They're going to be here on Monday. So we really don't need the mock FDA inspection anymore because we're going to have the real FDA here on Monday. I'm like, that makes sense. I'm okay with that. That's a really good reason for canceling it. Do you want me to help out with the CAPAs that you might have from 483s? Do you want me to help you during the audit? What do you want? And they said, let's just go ahead and cancel it for now. And if we need your help, we'll contact you. I said, okay. The only thing I won't be able to do is I won't be able to give you a refund for non-refundable travel. Now, some consultants, they wouldn't be that nice. They would say, no, we're not even going to give you a refund. I already scheduled that time and I can't rebook that time. So it depends on the consultant. What are their refund policies? So that might be something you ask before you go signing a contract for a consultant to come do work. What's your refund policy? What's your termination policy? And I'm going to hire you for a mock FDA inspection. The FDA shows up. I don't really need you. So think about it. There is also another scenario, and this is and this has actually happened to me as well. I was a BSI auditor. I came in to do a recertification audit for a large client of BSI's, and I was working on a team, so we had a team of auditors there. And about an hour and a half into the audit on the first day, the FDA showed up and wanted to do an FDA inspection at the exact same time we were doing the audit. And they said, we don't have the resources for a certification audit and an FDA inspection at the same time. Now, I would argue that they probably could have. It would have been very awkward and unusual to have that situation, but they could have supported it. They just chose not to, and they kicked us out of the building. BSI's policy was if you scheduled it, you have to cancel it within 30 days of the audit. If you don't cancel it before 30 days, we will charge you the full price of what was scheduled, because they can't reschedule those auditors so easily. So we were already there. We had already traveled there. We already had everything set aside. We couldn't just reschedule another audit on a whim. And so therefore the client got charged for it. And we had to go back later as quickly as we could to try to finish that up, because we didn't want them to lose their certification. So the client got charged twice for the recertification audit. And that was unfortunate for the cost of the audit, but I can understand why they would feel it's going to be really hard for us to handle an FDA inspector and a team of notified body auditors at the exact same time in our facility. And that could have created some interesting dynamics with an FDA inspector looking at the same areas and the same records that we were looking at. So I don't necessarily say they made the wrong choice, but they didn't even really discuss it. So I think that would be something that you want to think about twice. Can we really support this? And if it's not really working out, then cancel it or terminate it, rather than terminate it before you even see it being a problem. It's possible that an FDA inspector only would have been there for a day, and we could have continued in looking at other areas and worked together to make it work for the company. But that wasn't tried. So think very carefully about what the consequences will be. Is this going to jeopardize your licenses in other countries, your CE marking in Europe? Is it going to be reported back to the FDA and they may come back as an auditor or inspector at your facility? Are you going to get charged for the work even though it wasn't done? What's going to happen? But it is okay to terminate the audits. And when things are going really badly, that might be the best answer. I'll give you a final example here, and this has happened to us recently. We had a client that asked us to do a remote audit. So there's no travel involved. We're doing everything remotely. We asked the client, well, okay, when do you want this? They told us they wanted it right away. And like, do you have all the CAPAs that you want us to look at completed and they're ready to be audited? Well, no, they're not done yet. So, well, then you ought to schedule it for when you are done, so we'll have all the records we need to review it. And so they did that. They waited until they thought they were ready. And then when we actually started doing the audit, every single record we looked at was incomplete, or were there things that were missing. So it was not a good outcome. Everything that we were looking at seemed to be needed more work and was not complete. And they were going to get, no, this CAPA does not appear to be effective, and we can't close down this audit finding. After that happened on the second or the third CAPA in a row, I think it would have been a good time to say, timeout. I don't think you're ready. We told you to wait until you're ready, but you didn't do the things that you said you were going to do in your CAPA. This doesn't look effective. You probably should terminate this audit until you're ready. Maybe we can help you with fixing these CAPAs with the time that we've set aside, but all you're going to have is a report that says none of these meet the requirements. But that wasn't done. So that would be a good time to think, okay, it seems like we're making the same mistake every single case here that you're looking at. Maybe we need to update these a little bit more and do something different before we'll be ready for this closure CAPA audit that we're doing here. So that would be a real good thing to consider in that kind of a situation. If you've paid a consultant to come in and do an effectiveness check of your system, and the effectiveness check is not going well, and there seems to be a repeat issue, maybe you need to take a timeout and say, okay, this timeout on the audit. Can we just have a consulting discussion here? What can we do? What are our options? Does this make sense to move forward on this? Or can we use your time more value in another way for more value to try to identify what we need to fix so we're on the right track, and then we'll have you come back and do the audit when we're ready. So that might be a really good idea, but a lot of companies are afraid to do that. So if you're an auditor, you might even, if you're doing an internal audit for a company and you're a consultant, or you're doing a supplier audit and you're doing an audit for a company as a consultant, you might think about recommending to them, hey, it doesn't look like you're ready. Or if there's chaos, like you're in the middle of a recall and you're doing rework out on a production floor, not the best time for an audit. Like, if I'm auditing the recall process, that's one thing, but if I'm not, this is not routine operation, not a great time for an audit. Let's reschedule this. So don't be afraid to raise the question. Don't just automatically terminate it, but say, does this make sense? Would we be better to terminate this and reschedule it? And what would be the consequences? And everybody agrees and knows what would be at stake, and they all think this is the best plan, they terminate it. Or they might go ahead and they might try to do some adjustments to try to adjust for the situation and how things are going. So I thought that might help some companies because, when I first planned this, I was thinking of that client that, they probably should have terminated that because they really weren't ready. Here we created this audit report and basically told them everything is not good. Every single thing we looked at was not effective and you're going to have to redo your work. We probably could have told them that in a shorter amount of time, but they kept on coming back. Well, what if we do this? What if we do this? And it just wasn't a productive use of their time and their resources by doing it that way. And some companies just don't know better. So they need the auditor to say, hey, maybe this isn't the best solution. So that is what I was thinking of. But since then, I've come up with other examples of here's cases where you might terminate. So I hope that helps you out there. Yes, you can terminate an audit. There will be consequences depending on the situation. It may be very minor and not a big deal, or it might be a very significant deal and definitely don't do it. So you can bring it up, you can discuss it, and don't be afraid of it. It's better sometimes to discuss these things and make an informed decision instead of a knee-jerk reaction or just going with the flow because you're afraid to terminate things. It is an option, and it should be brought up at the beginning of any opening meeting on an audit. Thank you very much, everybody. At the end of this month, Matthew Walker is going to have a brand new video or webinar available for you on the UK certification process. That's the UK CA mark. So if you're a company that has CE marking and you're thinking, well, what's going to happen? Can I continue to sell things in the UK? You definitely want to tune in for that because your deadline, depending on what your device is, will be July 1st or June 30th of next year. So 2023, middle of the year, you will no longer be able to sell your CE mark product in the UK, and you will have to get a UK CA mark. And that process is very different. And there are different notified bodies involved. They're not even called notified bodies. They're approved bodies, and they have to be in the UK. There's also some questions as to whether your certificates for quality system would be valid under the UK CA program. So stay tuned for that. If you're interested in that and your company is doing business in the UK with a CE mark now, you definitely are going to want to stay tuned for that. It'll be available by the end of the month. It'll be a webinar that you can download. So if you're interested in that, you can purchase that from our website. And also next week, I will be doing another webinar at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. So I will see you then. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.